What's going to spark their interest besides going off in another career, or how do they think about it? You've got to make them excited about it, I guess. And, excitement is all this other stuff that you can do. You might eventually get there 10 or 12 years down the track. You got to do all the hard yards first.
Jobs and skills are always huge topics when it comes to hospitality, but possibly never more so than now. There's an ongoing staffing crisis. Jobs and skills are at the forefront of the national political conversation, and it seems like a great time to talk to somebody who employs around 80 kitchen staff across 12 hotels. Our guest today is Chris Wotton. He's the Group Executive Chef of GM Hotels, and he's all about jobs and skills. Welcome, Chris, to the podcast.
Great. Thank you for having me, Dani.
Tell us a little bit about GM Hotels and your role there.
So GM Hotels, we've got a group of 12 hotels all across Adelaide, north, south and east and west. We employ approximately about 400 staff across the whole group, and in that is about 80 kitchen staff. So my role is to oversee the kitchens, collaborating with the head chefs, sous chefs, and then helping them employ skill sets and procurement as well. So, and developing menus and things that go along the way.
It sounds like that would keep you very busy. I mean, even in so-called normal times. How have you found, what have been some of the biggest challenges and scenarios with the labour crisis that we're in?
So I'm always chasing my tail every week. In one way, we're lucky enough we're a big enough group where I can move chefs from venue to venue to backfill. But then once you've backfilled somewhere, you've got to backfill the one that you've taken it out of sometimes. So, it is just an ongoing harder and harder each week with people, probably leaving the industry as well, which has made it even harder, post-COVID. I think a lot of them got, they always thought about it, especially when they got there in, probably their mid to late 40s, maybe early 50s. And that's type of left even a bigger hole to backfill there. But I find it we find it quite hard, even in our group, to resource each kitchen. Now, I'm lucky enough we haven't had to shut any kitchens or close any days. We're still able to trade at 100%. So that's been one bonus out of all this.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, what kinds of, I don't know whether it's menu simplifications or simplifying processes, like what kinds of, contingencies have you to put in place just because of this constant shuffle and juggle?
Yeah, so one big shift that we made coming out of COVID was the menus, as much as they're simplified, we then went to basically printing in-house so they can change them in between services if they run out of something, or if or they can expand them or contract them as they see fit. Some days on a Sunday lunch, you run out of something, you can quickly go reprint for dinner rather than scribbling all over your menus, to say, well, we're out of this. So that's one thing that we've really implemented coming out of post-COVID too, and also looking at the skill set as well, and steps on plates, and also the supply chain too. It's not, we might run out of stuff, you simply can't get it. So we've been able to quickly adapt our menus to suit the current climate, which has been quite beneficial in thinking on their feet as well.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting that to have to be so nimble. I'm interested as well in, this steps on the plate and how you've simplified things for staff in the kitchen that might be that little bit greener or a little bit undermanned. What kinds of changes have you made to dishes and processes there?
Well, looking only at, trying to minimise 2 or 3 step process, whether it's the protein, the carbohydrate and the sauce. And then we went to a bit of a, shared type of salad down the middle because we operated a lot of, hotels and pubs. So instead of having to put the salad on every plate, then people don't eat it. We've then taken those steps to look at simplifying it, and also, the space you have in each kitchen. Obviously, you've got some large ones, some small ones. So it's adapting and getting some of the guys to rethink on what they do. They'll only do what they've always done unless you challenge them to look at it differently, and to bring, to make their life a little bit simpler in these tougher times.
I mean, it sounds like you're finding positives in amongst all this, stress. Like, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing?
Well, we do weekly stock takes, so minimising your SKUs, you don't have to count as much stock, so that's one bonus. And getting them to think on their feet and think a little bit more broadly as well. You've got some people, who have come in. You've got some great head chefs, great teams, but some really good head chefs. And then you've got some, slightly unskilled cooks and chefs below them, which are still great workers, but just haven't had the experience. So it's not making it too difficult and out of their comfort zone for them. And so you can try and get that little bit of consistency, but by simplifying and still giving a good product.
I mean, it's so interesting, that balance between restriction and creativity. I mean, I know as a writer, like sometimes when you've got a really restricted word count or you've got to fit things to a certain format, you can actually find it forces you to be more creative in a way, doesn't it?
That's right. So, it's only when you be challenged with these type of things that you start to think differently. Otherwise, if you've got everything in the world to work with, you'll make it too complicated, So we try and keep it as simplified, and also speed too. When we're in restrictions as well, and you only got 25% capacity or 50% capacity, you had to make sure you turn those tables over to try and reach some type of normality of revenue. So speed output was always in mind as well.
Yeah. And I actually love that salad in the middle of the table concept, because you're right, like a lot, especially I think in pubs where people just think they need to put, something that looks a little bit fresh or green on a plate, but then that's not what people necessarily are there for. But then, there might be one person on the table that would love to scoop up everybody's salad.
That's right. And that's what we've found too, So we tried to simplify it. So protein and carbohydrates and sauce on the plate, and then give them a side salad to share. And we contract that and expand that to the sides of the table. So if it's obviously a table 2, they get a smaller one to share. If it's a table of 8 or 10, you give them a couple down the middle. We can always give them more, but generally you find that they don't eat it all anyway. So it just goes to waste. And a lot of time when you're serving salad with a steak or a snitty or whatever it may be, it's more of a garnish. Anything, you find even a lot of people just push it aside and just want to eat their snitty and chips and gravy.
Yep, they certainly do. How have you found the response from customers with these changes? Have you had complaints with the, shorter menus or the changing some of these dishes, or have you found people pretty amenable?
No, I think people have been pretty adaptive to it. They knew all the challenges that were around, even them at home having to get supplies from the supermarket or whatever it may be. So no, there wasn't really any pushback at all. There was a time there where I was on the tools for a while, for 18 months, because we didn't, was pretty short staffed, and I jumped in and helped. And we were changing the menu twice a day from lunch to dinner. And it also gave people, obviously you had your staples there, but the other ones you could actually change to, it gave creativity and inspiration to the kitchen guys. They weren't doing the same dish for the next 3 to 4 months and getting bogged down in it, but also then gave your regulars something else to look for or look at, So there was times when we couldn't get, a certain ingredient, whether it be, cockles or mussels or whatever it may be. You could actually just take that out of the menu, go back, rewrite it, and then, or if you got something that came in that was really good and fresh and on special, you could actually put it straight on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I guess a lot of pub menus you do feel like they're pretty bolted on, but, you've really introduced this level of flexibility, which I guess works at both ends.
Yeah. So, you've always got your snitties, you've always got your fish and chips and your squid and your burgers and your staples like that. But there's probably about, probably 5 to 6, maybe 7 items that you could just flip around, and it might be just changing the condiment that goes with it. Or I could buy just a certain amount and we just say until we're sold out. We didn't want to hang on to that or, have that wastage. So we'd just say, all right, we're sold out. I'm sorry if, we'll get some more in tomorrow and hopefully you can come back tomorrow if you want. So it made people a bit more excitement, that just didn't get stagnant, and it was a bit of a challenge at the start for the kitchen guys to get their head around it because they weren't used to that change so quickly. But once they got into the system of it, it was just became second nature. They could actually go into the cool room or the dry store and actually create a dish of what you've got on or the freezer or what you've got on hand to create something, so it made them think outside the box a bit.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously, with the staff short and not as many internationals around, you've got to look at other angles to get people into the industry. Can you tell me what else you're doing?
So basically, we've just South Australian government are currently building 5 new technical colleges here in SA, putting $208 million into them. So there's 3 around the city, and there's one up at Port Augusta and one down at Mount Gambier. So they've put together this team, and I've been asked to sit on the board of another 10 people, and it's called a Hospitality Reference Group. And what they want to try and do is actually get people from the industry in different job places, and then bring them together to try and educate kids that are coming through school why they should choose to come into the hospitality sector. Now, we've only just started it basically this week, so it's probably going to take a while. But basically, trying to reach out to these kids and say, hospitality can be a career. It's just not a fill-in part-time job for a bit of pocket money. You can look at it as a career. So, there's a lot of steps we've got to do. So it's good that South Australian government are putting all this money into it, which will be built over the next 4 years. But they don't want it to be perceived as a school either. They want to try and bring it more industry-like, so it's actually a real case scenario. So I'm not quite sure how that looks at the moment, but that's what they're wanting to do. Because some stats have come out that South Australia is the lowest skilled economy in Australia, with 38% of kids who are coming out of school have no post-school qualifications. It's only 62% that are actually coming out with a Cert 3 or higher, or are going to university. So the other 38% are just falling by the wayside.
It's so interesting and so positive. Great to have that focus on the hospitality industry, and also to have, the industry as part of this process. I mean, what would you say to someone who is considering what to do when they left school? I mean, how would you sell the hospitality industry to them?
Yeah, it's a good question that we had a bit of think tank the other day. I think there's 2-pronged attack. I think the first one is actually, going to the schools, which we're looking at doing, and speaking to the kids who are doing hospitality at school. So currently there's 48 schools, public schools in SA, which offer the hospitality and cookery section. And I think it's asking the kids, how do you see our industry? Do they just see it, I'm going to cooking because I'll get out of science, or to actually see it as a career? Whether it's front of house, back of house, financials, or whatever it may be, but within this sector. But then also telling them all the positives as well. And I think by default, we think if you're going to go into hospitality, initially you think, well, I'm going to go to a cafe or a restaurant or a pub. That's where they cook. But I think there's so many other avenues in our industry now, whether it's TV, whether it's publication, whatever it may be, that there's a lot of other exciting avenues that you can actually still cook and be in this industry. So I think it's telling them that what else is out there. They all know they all see MasterChef and all that sort of stuff, but do they actually know there's chefs and a team behind that actually just test and create the recipes? So I think you've got to spark their interest in it and just show them it's just not, going down to the local cafe, which is great, but that's not the stop. What do they hear out and about? Do they think it's just a hot, sweaty environment, and you've got to work every weekend and work long hours? I think we need to get their perspective on it and see how they're thinking of it as well.
Yeah, but you would love them to come into the kitchen and work weekends.
Definitely. I'm not saying that that's not an option, but it's just, I think it's giving them, what's going to spark their interest besides going off for another career, or how do they think about it? You got to make them excited about it, I guess. And, excitement is all this other stuff that you can do. You might eventually get there 10 or 12 years down the track. You got to do all the hard yards first. I think there's a dose of reality, and there's a dose of, what the possibilities are.
Chris, I'm sure you'd be able to inspire them with your own story. Can you give us a bit of, the Chris Wotton story? How did you get into cooking in the first place?
Yeah, I had no interest in cooking at all when I was a kid or growing up. I'd never cooked at home, really, besides probably a barbecue when we were camping or something like that. And so then I wanted to leave school in year 10. I was advised not to go on to year 11 and 12 if I wasn't going to go to uni, and I wasn't going to go to uni. So I then by default got into commercial cookery at TAFE, only because our family friend was one of the teachers there. And I rocked up the first day not even knowing what a chicken stock was, not knowing anything, never picked up a knife. So I did that, got an apprenticeship at with a local family who had the contract to cook for schools for the Uniting Church. So I was basically doing bulk stuff at the start, heating up baked beans, making scrambled eggs, and the kids would serve themselves. So service was sitting down and eating. Still had no idea. I just thought it was cash really coming in. I didn't have to go to school. So by then I went through, golf clubs, got into restaurants, different various cafes and restaurants and so forth. Did a little bit of travelling around Australia. Ended up in Margaret River, where I was working over there. We'd moved from Queensland over to there, moved my 3 kids and my wife, and we're all about to settle down. And then it ended up landing a job with Maggie Beer for product development chef. So then we moved back to SA. Way out of my depth again. Had no idea on product development at all. Didn't even know what the job was. So I was lucky to nail that, and then moved over to SA, and then I worked for her for 7 years and still do a little bit of consultancy work for her as well at this point.
That's an amazing story, especially when you're making it sound like you didn't know what you were doing at any point, which I'm sure is very far from the truth. Was there a point at which, you lit up with food? Like, was there a mentor that took you under their wing, or was there, I don't know, something, one of the jobs or even a dish or an ingredient that you were just like, oh no, this isn't just baked beans, this is something special?
Not particularly. I've got a really good mate who was my head chef, back when I was an apprentice, and still best mates with him these days. But we just had good camaraderie. He was a good mentor. He was a good teacher. I came from the Sunshine Coast at Caloundra or Carramundi. Now, I'm not going to say there's no really top restaurants there back in the, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. You had to go to Noosa for that. Noosa was so far away, back in those days. So there was really no inspiration. There was probably only really Gourmet Traveller out and about as a magazine. So there was nothing. I just bumbled along. It was type of a job you fell into. Someone needed a hand, you'd go help them. There were skill sets that you learnt, along the way. Yeah, definitely, with having to cater for 1,000 people and timing and logistics and all that type of stuff. But there was never, really a penny drop type of moment where I go, this is really good. This is what I want to do. I just moving to Margaret was good. It was a great lifestyle. I didn't have to work nights, still had to work weekends, but I worked in a cafe providor over there. I'd say type of found dishes that I like to cook and do. So I guess it was a gradual interest in food and cooking, and it just type of stick with. And it was something that you always knew, so you always fell back into. You type of I came and go earlier on out in the industry where you want to have a break. I went and bought a lawn mowing business just to get out of the kitchen. And, and then after 18 months, you type of default, the kitchen's the place. I don't know if you just know you need to be there or you just fall back into it, and you know someone and you just keep getting work and you type of you stay in the industry, so, but there's definitely been, exciting stuff I've done over the years for sure.
Yeah, so interesting. And tell us more about working with Maggie Beer. I mean, she's so famous. I mean, the burnt fig ice cream is the one that everybody knows. Did you get your hands on much of that?
One of my jobs was to develop ice cream. So for 7 years I was eating so much ice cream. So it was quite a unique role. We were in Margaret River. My brother-in-law found this little paper clipping. Maggie Beer wants a product development chef. It was in the local paper. He sent it to me. He said, you should apply. Had no idea. So I sent off my resume and I sent this proper box of stuff I was working on over in Margaret River because we had a providor as well, so making relishes and pickles and stuff. Mucking around really. And so I sent that. So that arrived, but my email didn't go through. And so her PA rang me and said, we've got this stuff. What's it about? So I said, it's for my application for my job. She said, Maggie's down to the last 2.
Oh,
She's about to make her decision. I said, well, listen, I think this was on like a Thursday. And I said, well, listen, I'll fly over on the Monday. And if she's happy for me, she said, okay, she'll ring you tonight. So she rang me. I said, I'll fly over on the Monday, fly back on Tuesday. No dramas, already done. So I had a 2-day interview with Maggie cooking at her house. And I was like, holy moly, what's going on here? So she was very welcoming, as Maggie is. We spoke for hours and hours around the kitchen table. And then basically she rang me the following week and said, yeah, you've got the role, out of about 900 applicants. So it was like, needle in a haystack type thing.
that's amazing. And if your email had got through, it might never have happened.
That's right. So I was like, so we moved over 2 weeks later, packed up the family once again and moved over. And as I said, I didn't even know what the role was or meant. Still trying to get my head around it. I hadn't done any product development or anything like that. So I had all this science. I had no science background, so it's all, science type based. But Maggie's very, tactile and it's all about flavour. So I type understand cooking. I had to understand her cooking style and her thought process, and then try and develop that into a product. So I worked on. At that time, I was the only qualified chef in the company. We had a lot of great cooks, and I just worked. It was only me and Maggie, basically, at that point, that worked on product development. So it was just like, hit the ground running. We were working on soups and ice creams and relishes and pastes and biscuits and pate. It was just everything was type of different. There wasn't type of one SKU. That thing. So it was a really, a really good job, when you pinch yourself when you get it and you're in there, you go, holy, I get to make ice cream for a living. And, and then that year I started, she got this Senior Australian of the Year too. So her diary went nuts. Next Minute Media was on. So because I was the only one there, there was all the media that we had to do. There was MasterChef and there was Delicious magazine, and it just went on and on and on and on, So, and I had no idea about that industry as well, how all that worked, So we'd be filming something in the morning, then we'd be doing a development in the afternoon of some type of product, and then, flying off to do a live show somewhere else, or writing a cookbook or doing a TV show. So it was a really diverse type of role in the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're a total advertisement for hospitality in that regard, and, that diversity of roles within the industry. So, yeah, I guess.
So that's what I mean. But, these, speaking to these kids, that opened my eyes to what other chefs roles there are within this industry. And you don't really think about them when did MasterChef. Didn't realise they had a team of 4 or 5 chefs that just trial and test behind the scenes. A whole team there, and then you go and do magazine shoots, and there's test chefs there, and so there's other scopes. They've got to have the skill sets. Obviously, there's certain skills you've got to have going into those roles. Very much time management is one of them, because producers and film, and that doesn't stop for you. Just got to make it work, and think on your feet. So there's very much. A lot of, in product development, there's a lot of chefs out there, and that can lead to product development as well, which is an exciting space. Sorry. If you're science minded as well.
Yeah, well, I think, you're also pointing to another benefit of working in the hospitality industry, which is all those transferable skills that you build up along the way, whether it's time management or people management, or now, you're working with government. So I think people in hospitality they don't always realise that their skills are in high demand in other industries. That's
right. So I think you pick up all these along the way, even if you're only, a casual in the industry. I think you do pick up, how to use a computer system for sales, or how to, meet and greet people, or just time management in general, because, you've got to flip tables, how all that works. You've got, there's a lot of strategizing behind it that I think kids pick up, which is useful for them in their life.
So, you're working with government now, and I know it's state government, and there's a lot of discussion at all levels around jobs and skills. But what kinds of things would you like to see change for the industry in terms of government policies or initiatives that could be rolled out?
Oh, good question. Not quite sure, really. Obviously we need a skill set. How do we give them the skill set on? For me, we've got a number of apprentices and a number of front of house trainees that are doing like Cert 4s in our group as well. And I think from our experience, what's made it so difficult is all the paperwork, red tape and emails that come with it. And because we're so short on time, it just makes it a lot harder. If we could streamline that process and then get people into work a lot quicker, I think it'd be a lot better.
Yeah. What about from an immigration point of view or of visas? Would you like to see any changes in the way that's all structured?
I'm not really across all the details of that on how all that works. I haven't had too much to do with it. We haven't had any, I've been in this role, we haven't had any visa people work for us. Not to say that we wouldn't, we just haven't had them work for us. That's all. So I'm not quite sure on how that all structured, really.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Well, it just sounds like you're at such an interesting space, with a lot of innovation going on in the businesses as they stand. But so much still to happen and come online. What are you feeling really excited about, Chris?
Well, I'm feeling excited about that. The SA government has, done this research and found that their skill set is the lowest in the country. And they're actually taking action to do about it. So it'd be interesting. It's really exciting to have this, this board on the hospitality reference group on board to give advice to the government. And they know that teachers haven't got the skill set or the thought process, and they're doing the best they can and do a great job. But at least we can bring a little bit of how to get into the industry and the reality of the industry. So I think these technical colleges setting up, how they're going to pan out and help people get the proper resources, and then for all of us to have the input into it, that we've been asked to have the input into it, to give them that guidance and skill sets to help them actually achieve. So when they come out of these technical colleges or TAFE or whatever it may be that they're going to work through, that they're coming out better prepared for the industry. I haven't been, haven't really been back at TAFE, for a long time. But if I think back to where we were, there are some certain technical things that you need to do, which are good skill sets, but there's such diversity these days. I think it needs a little touch of reality as well.
Definitely. Well, it's a real validation of the industry, and it's important to the economy and society to have this, government backup, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. I think it's very important, and they've recognised it, and they want to try and make improvements. So I think there'll be, certain other studies done along the way to show that we can, actually accomplish or get the numbers a lot better. So we are looking at next year forming a bit of a career expo, if you want to call it. We had a discussion about it the other day to try and bring teachers and students and parents along, but have a lot of, just not a card table with a pull-up banner type thing, but have some, have some type of discussions, some key people in the industry, but also supply chains, suppliers, chefs there to talk to, whether it's a one-on-one, a bit like Simon Bryant, who's on the board, called a bit of a speed dating, scenario where kids can sit down and ask you some quick rapid-fire questions and then move on. Because, we all come from different backgrounds as well. It's just not, cafes and restaurants and hotels. There's aged care, there's conference centres, there's mining, there's all this other different stuff, So where do they actually want to see themselves, and what do they find it more interesting? And have these parents and teachers and the students to come along and ask those questions. So, and try to make it, a bit more interactive as well.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sure it would be actually life-changing for a lot of those kids. You just never know what's going to light the spark for someone. And I'm sure it would happen in that room.
Yeah, and have a few, bit of cooking demos, or don't make them too long and boring. You've got to make it quite exciting to keep their attention span, So, and it might be a student that cooks alongside a chef, that develop a dish in 15, 20 minutes or what it may be, So, and I know that Emma McCaskill, who works for the government, who's formatted this hospitality group, they've set up a bit of a student competition as well. So a little bit of a cook-off competition. So I think there's about 5 or 6 judges, and then they actually win a prize. I'm not quite sure. I think it's a trip somewhere I saw the other day. So they're just starting to format that. So to get in kids, start interested in cooking, and then they can learn along the way while they're at school. So by the time they get to year 12, they can do a vet course if they want to leave a bit earlier and do their training during 11 and 12. But at least they come out with some type of qualification. So I think it's just all these type of ideas to try and throw on the table to get kids thinking about this industry, and knowing that they can go be, a maitre d' in a fine dining restaurant and earn some really good money, and or in a top hotel or whatever it may be, because I know a lot of young kids probably think, I'll just go work at the local, hotel, or I'll go work at the local cafe. It's really only pocket money, which is great. We still need those kids, but get them to think of it as an industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I just want to let everyone know that there's a really beautiful chat with Maggie Beer on my brother podcast, Deep in the Weeds. So if it's so nice. So if anyone wants a bit more Maggie in their life and they haven't heard that chat, just search it up. Chatting with Anthony Huckstep. It's just a really warm and beautiful chat. Yeah, I listened
to that about a month or two ago. It was really good.
Yeah, it's a beauty. But yeah, so great to get your perspective today, and all the best with everything that you're working on. It's really exciting. So great for the industry and for the energy that it will bring. I really appreciate your time today, Chris.
No worries at all. Thank you very much, Jenny.
Thank you. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This